Emily Carter was walking home from the local grocery store in the heart of Manhattan, her arms full of shopping bags. The air was crisp, and the streets were bustling with people rushing to their destinations. Lost in thought about the dinner she was preparing for her husband, Richard, and their friends, she didn't notice the sleek black sedan speeding down the narrow street until it was too late. The bags tumbled to the ground, their contents scattering across the sidewalk as Emily let out a startled scream. A man rushed out of the car, his face pale with concern. "Ma'am, are you okay? I am so sorry. I didn't see you. Where did you come from?" he stammered, extending a hand to help her up. Emily grimaced as she brushed dirt off her coat and winced at the scrape on her hand. "You almost ran me over," she snapped, still shaken. "Who even lets people like you drive in this city?" The man, tall and dressed in a rumpled leather jacket, softened his tone. "You're right. I should have been more careful. Let me help you with your groceries. Can I give you a ride home?" Emily hesitated, but the pain in her wrist reminded her she couldn't carry everything herself. She sighed.
"Fine.
"But this doesn't mean you're forgiven." As they drove, Emily began to relax. The man introduced himself as Daniel Miller, a single father and auto mechanic who had moved to the city a year ago for a fresh start with his young daughter, Grace. "You're lucky," Daniel remarked as he helped unload her bags in front of her brownstone. "Your husband must appreciate having such a smart, beautiful wife." Emily's smile faltered. "Thanks," she said curtly, unwilling to share the cracks in her marriage with a stranger. Inside, she unpacked her groceries and began preparing dinner. The house was eerily quiet, a constant reminder of Richard's absence. He had been working late for months, claiming to be consumed by a high-stakes architectural project. Emily had learned not to ask too many questions. His irritation was rarely worth it. The sound of the intercom jolted her from her thoughts. She wiped her hands and glanced at the screen. Standing at the door were Samantha and Michael Brooks, her college friends who had stayed close through the years. "Happy birthday, Emily," Samantha exclaimed as they entered, enveloping her in a hug. Michael handed her a bouquet of sunflowers. "Where's Richards?" Michael asked, glancing around the room. "Still at work," Emily replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Samantha frowned. "Emily, you deserve more than this. You've always been here for him. Maybe it's time you focus on yourself for a change." Emily forced a smile and changed the subject, leading them to the dinner table. Hours later, Richard finally arrived, his tie loosened and his expression strained. "Happy birthday," he said, handing Emily a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond necklace, beautiful yet impersonal, just like every other gift he had given her. As the night wore on, Richard's attention remained glued to his phone, a pattern Emily had grown accustomed to. After their friends left, she confronted him. "Richard, even when you're here, you're not really here. What's going on?" "I'm working, Emily." "Why do you have to nitpick everything?" he replied sharply. Emily bit her lip to hold back tears. As he retreated to his office, she felt the weight of her loneliness pressing down on her. The next morning, she woke up to find his study empty, the couch still rumpled from where he had slept. Something wasn't right. When Richard finally came downstairs, he avoided her gaze.
"We need to talk," he said.
Emily's heart sank. Emily took a deep breath. "What is it, Richard? What's going on?" He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I've been seeing someone else. Her name is Jessica. She's pregnant, and we're expecting a child." The words hit Emily like a freight train. She swayed on her feet, barely able to process what he was saying. "How long has this been going on?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Does it matter?" he replied, his tone detached. "I found out about the pregnancy a few weeks ago. I've made my decision, Emily. I want a divorce." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "On my birthday, Richard? You couldn't wait one more day to destroy our marriage." Richard's expression didn't waver. "I didn't want to lie to you anymore. I'll move out tonight. I've already found an apartment for you." Emily's anger surged. "You think you can just throw me out of my own home and move on, as if the last 10 years didn't happen?" Richard's face hardened. "The house is under my name, Emily. I'm doing what I think is best for everyone." Emily turned away, tears streaming down her face. She felt humiliated and discarded, but she refused to let him see her break. The next few weeks were a blur. Emily moved into the small apartment Richard had arranged, leaving behind the brownstone they had built together. She took only what she needed, determined not to carry the weight of their shared memories into her new life. Her friends rallied around her, with Samantha visiting often to keep her company. Michael offered her a job at his construction firm, knowing she had studied architecture before giving up her career to support Richards. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Emily found herself crossing the same street where she had met Daniel. The city lights blurred in the rain, and she barely noticed the car speeding toward her until it skidded to a stop just inches away. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" a familiar voice called out. Emily looked up to see Daniel stepping out of his car, a wry smile on his face. "You again," she said, shaking her head. "Come on," he said, holding out his hand. "Let me give you a ride home." Again. As they drove, Emily opened up about the upheaval in her life. She told Daniel about the betrayal, the divorce, and the fresh start she was trying to build. Daniel listened quietly, his hands steady on the wheel. "I've been there," he said finally. "When Grace's mom left us, I thought I'd never recover. But life has a way of surprising you." Their friendship grew from that night. Daniel and Grace became fixtures in Emily's life, bringing light to her otherwise lonely days. They spent weekends exploring Central Park, visiting museums, and playing board games at Daniel's apartment. One evening, as Emily watched Grace and Daniel laughing over a jigsaw puzzle, she felt a pang of warmth she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. Their bond deepened with time, and Emily found herself smiling more, her heart slowly mending. When Daniel kissed her for the first time, it was as if the world had shifted. "I don't want to rush you," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. "You're not rushing me," Emily replied, her voice steady. "This feels right." Months passed, and Emily's life transformed in ways she hadn't imagined. Her relationship with Daniel flourished, blending warmth and stability with the exciting spark of new love. Grace, with her boundless energy and bright smile, became a source of pure joy for Emily, who found herself stepping into a maternal role she hadn't thought possible. Professionally, things were looking up as well. Michael entrusted Emily with more responsibilities at his construction firm, and she proved her worth by taking on challenging projects with skill and creativity. One of these projects required a complex redesign to accommodate environmental concerns, and her innovative solutions earned her the admiration of the entire team. Emily's days were filled with purpose and fulfillment, but reminders of her past sometimes crept back. One such reminder arrived in the form of a call from Samantha. "Emily," Samantha said hesitantly, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I ran into Richard the other day." Emily's chest tightened. "What did he say?" "He looked rough. He mentioned he's having problems at work and with Jessica." Emily wasn't surprised. Richard's downfall felt inevitable, but hearing about it didn't bring her the satisfaction she had expected. "Thanks for letting me know, Sam," she said, her voice calm. "But I'm not interested in what's happening with Richard anymore. My focus is on the future." And she meant it. One evening, as Emily and Daniel sat on his apartment balcony watching Grace play with her dolls, Daniel spoke. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone thoughtful. "This apartment has been good for us, but it's not ideal for Grace. I want her to have more space, maybe even a backyard to play in. What do you think about us building a house together?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. The idea of building something new, not just physically but emotionally, resonated deeply with her. "I think it's a wonderful idea," she said, smiling. Over the next several months, Emily and Daniel poured their energy into designing and constructing their dream home on a plot of land near the outskirts of the city. The house became a symbol of their commitment to each other and the future they were building together. Grace was thrilled, often chiming in with ideas for her new room or the backyard. Meanwhile, Richard's life had taken a steep downward turn. Jessica had left him after her deception came to light. Her child wasn't his. His career faltered, and he found himself increasingly isolated. One evening, out of desperation, he drove to Emily's apartment. When she opened the door, her heart sank at the sight of him. Richard looked disheveled and broken, a shadow of the confident man she once knew. "Emily," he began, his voice hoarse. "I made a mistake. I didn't know what I had until I lost it. Please, can we try again?" Emily stared at him, her expression unreadable. After a long pause, she spoke. "Richard, I've moved on. I'm happy now, truly happy. I hope you find peace, but it won't be with me." Richard left without another word, his shoulders slumped. By the time the house was finished, Emily and Daniel's life together felt seamless. On the day they moved in, Michael and Samantha came over to celebrate. Grace was ecstatic, running through the new space with her best friend, Michael and Samantha's son. As the sun set, Daniel wrapped his arm around Emily, looking out over their backyard, where Grace was laughing with her new puppy. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did," she echoed. For the first time in years, she felt not just content, but whole. Life in their new home felt like a dream. Emily embraced her role as a stepmother to Grace and began making plans for the family's future. Daniel's woodworking business, which he'd started shortly after moving into the house, was thriving. Emily found joy in helping him design furniture and manage the business alongside her work at Michael's firm. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily was sorting through some paperwork in the living room when she felt a wave of nausea. She dismissed it as exhaustion from a hectic week, but decided to schedule a doctor's appointment, just to be sure. A week later, sitting in the doctor's office, she was stunned to learn the truth. She was pregnant. That evening, she prepared a special dinner to share the news with Daniel. The warm glow of candles flickered across the dining table as Daniel and Grace entered the room, their laughter filling the space. "What's the occasion?" Daniel asked, grinning as he sat down. Emily reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "There's something I need to tell you." Daniel's brow furrowed slightly, but his smile remained. "What is it?" Emily took a deep breath, her eyes shining with emotion. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Daniel was speechless. Then his face broke into a wide grin, and he stood, pulling Emily into a tight embrace. Grace, ever observant, tilted her head curiously. "What's going on?" she asked. Daniel knelt beside her, his arm around Emily. "Grace, you're going to be a big sister." Grace's eyes widened with delight. "Really? A baby? That's amazing." She hugged Emily tightly, her excitement contagious. As the months passed, Emily and Daniel prepared for the arrival of their baby while continuing to juggle their busy lives. Grace was an enthusiastic helper, picking out baby clothes and decorating the nursery with her own artwork. Emily's friends remained a constant source of support. Samantha and Michael visited often, bringing gifts and offering advice. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Samantha turned to Emily. "You seem so at peace," Samantha said, her voice soft. "I am," Emily replied, resting a hand on her growing belly. "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." One day, while running errands in the city, Emily unexpectedly crossed paths with Richard. He looked healthier than when she had last seen him, but the encounter still caught her off guard. "Emily," he said, his voice tentative. "It's good to see you." "Hello, Richard," she replied politely, her tone neutral. His eyes flickered to her belly, and his expression softened. "Congratulations," he said. "I can see you're happy." "I am," she said simply. Richard hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "I hope things work out for you, Emily. You deserve it." "Thank you," she said, and with that, she turned and walked away, leaving her past firmly behind. As Emily's due date approached, Daniel and Grace planned a surprise for her. On a sunny spring afternoon, they took her to the backyard, where Daniel had built a custom swing set and a garden bench engraved with their family's names. Emily's heart swelled with emotion as she hugged them both. "It's perfect," she said, tears streaming down her face. The day their baby was born, Emily felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. Holding their son, Ethan, in her arms, she looked up at Daniel and Grace, who were beaming with pride. "You've given me everything I could ever want," she whispered to Daniel. "And you've given me a second chance at happiness," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. The years rolled by, and life only grew sweeter for Emily, Daniel, Grace, and little Ethan. Their home became a hub of joy and love, with laughter echoing through its walls daily. Grace, now a spirited 10-year-old, adored her younger brother and took her role as the big sister seriously, always looking out for him and guiding him with her youthful wisdom. Daniel's woodworking business expanded beyond what he had ever imagined, earning recognition for its craftsmanship and sustainable practices. Emily continued to excel in her work with Michael, balancing her professional achievements with the responsibilities of family life. One summer evening, as the family gathered on the back porch, Grace brought out a scrapbook she had been working on. "Look," she exclaimed, holding it up proudly. "I made this for us." The scrapbook was a colorful collection of photos, drawings, and little notes documenting their journey as a family. "This is beautiful, Grace," Emily said, flipping through the pages. There were photos of Grace and Ethan playing in the backyard, snapshots of family trips to the countryside, and even a picture of the swing set Daniel had built. "Do you remember this?" Grace asked, pointing to a photo of a picnic they had once shared by the river. "I do," Emily replied, smiling warmly. "That was one of the best days." "Every day is the best day with you guys," Grace said sincerely, earning hugs from both her parents. As life moved forward, Emily occasionally thought back to how far she had come. The pain of her past no longer felt sharp. It had softened into a quiet gratitude for the lessons it had taught her. She had grown stronger, more self-assured, and, most importantly, more open to embracing happiness when it came her way. One evening, as she and Daniel watched the sunset from their porch swing, Emily spoke up. "Do you ever think about how life could have turned out differently?" Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulder, pulling her close. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but every choice, every mistake, and every triumph led us here. And I wouldn't change a thing." Emily nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "Me neither." Meanwhile, Richard's life had stabilized, though it remained a stark contrast to Emily's. He had returned to his career in architecture, finding modest success, but his personal life was solitary. He often reflected on the decisions that had led him to this point, feeling a mixture of regret and acceptance. One day, while walking through a park, he spotted Emily and her family. She was pushing Ethan on a swing while Daniel and Grace played catch nearby. For a moment, he considered walking over to say hello, but he stopped himself. Instead, he watched from a distance, acknowledging silently that she was truly happy. As Richard turned to leave, he felt a surprising sense of peace. He had lost Emily, but she had found the joy she deserved, and in some way, that was enough for him. Back at home, Emily was unaware of Richard's fleeting presence. Her focus was solely on the here and now, cherishing every moment with her family. That night, as she tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mommy, will we always be happy like this?" Emily kissed his forehead and smiled. "Happiness isn't about having everything go perfectly all the time, Ethan. It's about appreciating the love and joy we have right now. And as long as we keep doing that, I believe we'll always be happy." The next morning, Emily woke up early and wandered out to the garden. The dew sparkled on the grass, and the air was crisp and cool. She sat on the bench Daniel had built, running her fingers over the engraved names: Emily, Daniel, Grace, and Ethan. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe for second chances, for resilience, and for the kind of love that could rebuild a life. When Daniel joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 mugs of coffee, she looked at him with a contented smile. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Just how lucky we are," she replied, taking his hand. And as the morning sun rose higher in the sky, Emily knew she had found everything she had ever hoped for and more. The Carter-Miller household grew even more vibrant with time. Ethan's energy mirrored Grace's curiosity, and the siblings became inseparable. Weekends were often spent outdoors, whether exploring local trails, visiting nearby lakes, or hosting friends and family for barbecues in their sprawling backyard. Emily and Daniel reveled in watching their children thrive, their home filled with joy and a deep sense of belonging. One crisp autumn day, as the family prepared for their annual pumpkin-picking outing, Grace came into the kitchen holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Mom, look what I found in the attic," she exclaimed. Emily took the paper and carefully unfolded it. It was an old sketch she had drawn years ago during her architecture classes. The design was rough, but the vision for a community center was clear. "You drew this?" Grace asked, her eyes wide with admiration. "I did," Emily said, a wistful smile playing on her lips. "It was part of a project I worked on in college. I dreamed of creating a space where people could come together, a place for families, children, and the community." "Why didn't you build it?" Grace asked. "Life took me in a different direction," Emily replied gently. "But who knows? Maybe one day." That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Emily showed the sketch to Daniel. "This is incredible," he said, studying the intricate details. "You could really make this happen, Emily." She hesitated. "It's been so long, Daniel. I'm not sure where to even start." "You've built so much already," he reminded her, his voice steady. "Our home, your career, our family. If anyone can bring this to life, it's you." His encouragement sparked something in her, and over the following weeks, Emily began refining her old design, blending it with new ideas. She shared her vision with Michael, who was immediately on board and offered to support her through his construction firm. The project quickly gained momentum. Emily pitched the idea to the city council, securing funding and rallying support from the local community. The center was to include a daycare, a library, a gymnasium, and multipurpose rooms for workshops and events. As construction began, Emily poured her heart into the project, balancing her family life with the demands of overseeing such a significant undertaking. Daniel and Grace often joined her at the site, their presence a constant source of encouragement. One evening, as Emily stood in the partially built library, Grace ran up to her, her face glowing with excitement.
"Mom."
"Ethan and I want to help pick out the books for this place. Can we?" Emily laughed and hugged her. "Of course, sweetheart. This place is for you, and everyone else will come here." Months later, the grand opening of the Carter Miller Community Center was a celebration of unity and achievement. Families from across the neighborhood gathered, marveling at the beautiful space Emily and her team had created. Grace and Ethan proudly led their friends through the building, showing off the library and the playrooms. In the middle of the festivities, Daniel pulled Emily aside. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "We did it," she corrected, leaning into him. The event marked a turning point for Emily, not just professionally, but personally. She had rediscovered her passion and proved to herself that it was never too late to pursue a dream. The years that followed were filled with more milestones. Grace grew into a confident young woman, following in Emily's footsteps with a love for design and community building. Ethan, meanwhile, discovered a passion for science, spending hours tinkering and building things with his father in Daniel's workshop. As for Emily and Daniel, their bond only deepened. They found joy in the little moments, late-night talks on the porch, family movie nights, and quiet mornings over coffee. One night, as they lay in bed, Daniel turned to Emily and said, "You know, when I met you, I thought my life was already as good as it could get. But you've given me so much more than I ever imagined." Emily smiled, her heart full. "And you've given me a second chance at everything I thought I'd lost. I couldn't ask for anything more." As the Carter Miller family settled further into their lives, the community center Emily had built became a cornerstone of their neighborhood. It was a vibrant hub, buzzing with activity every day, children laughing in the daycare, book clubs meeting in the library, and local artisans showcasing their crafts during weekend markets. For Emily, the center was more than just a project. It was a living testament to her journey. She often walked its halls, marveling at the people who filled it with life and joy. It became a symbol of second chances, not just for her, but for everyone who used its spaces to grow and thrive. One chilly December evening, The family gathered at the community center for its annual holiday celebration. Grace, now a teenager, was helping set up decorations with her friends, while Ethan, 6 years old and full of energy, was chasing after Daniel with a Santa hat. Emily stood back, taking it all in. Samantha and Michael were there too, Samantha chatting animatedly with parents from the daycare, while Michael helped coordinate volunteers. "You've created something really special here," Samantha said, joining Emily by the hot chocolate stand. Emily smiled. "It's amazing, isn't it? But it's not just me. It's everyone who believed in it." Samantha nudged her playfully. "Don't be modest. You've always had this incredible way of bringing people together." As the evening wore on, Emily found herself reflecting on how far she had come. The heartache she had endured with Richard felt like a distant memory, a reminder of the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself. The following spring brought a new set of challenges and opportunities. Daniel's woodworking business had grown so much that he was considering opening a second workshop in a neighboring town. Emily encouraged him, knowing how passionate he was about his craft. "Are you sure we can manage this?" Daniel asked one evening as they sat in their kitchen, reviewing plans for the expansion. "We've managed everything else, haven't we?" Emily replied, her eyes twinkling. "And you've got us behind you every step of the way." With her support, Daniel took the leap, and his second workshop became a success. He even started teaching woodworking classes at the community center, passing his skills on to others. Meanwhile, Grace was coming into her own. She had inherited Emily's love for design and often sketched layouts for imaginary buildings. One day, she shyly showed Emily a plan she had been working on, a treehouse she wanted to build for Ethan in their backyard. "This is amazing, Grace," Emily said, examining the detailed drawing. "Have you shown your dads?" Grace shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to see what you thought first." "I think he's going to love it," Emily said, pulling her daughter into a hug. With Daniel's help, Grace brought her design to life. The treehouse quickly became Ethan's favorite place, a little sanctuary where he could read, play, and imagine to his heart's content. The family's bond grew even stronger as the years went on. They celebrated milestones together: Grace's high school graduation, Ethan's first science fair win, and countless anniversaries for Emily and Daniel. Through it all, their home remained a place of warmth, laughter, and unconditional love. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Grace brought up a question that caught Emily off guard. "Mom, do you ever think about your life before us?" Emily paused, her fork hovering above her plate. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not in a bad way. Everything that happened before led me to you and your dad. And that's all that matters to me." Grace smiled, satisfied with the answer. As Grace's high school years came to a close, the family began to think about the next chapter in their lives. Emily and Daniel had always supported Grace's dreams, and it was clear she was ready to take the next step. She had received a scholarship to study architecture, just like her mother had once dreamed of. Emily couldn't help but feel a swell of pride as she watched Grace prepare for her move to college. "I can't believe this day has come," Emily said, sitting on the edge of Grace's bed, folding clothes into a suitcase. "It feels like just yesterday you were running around with Ethan, making forts in the living room." Grace smiled, her eyes filled with excitement and a hint of nervousness. "I know, Mom. It's crazy. But I'm ready. I'm going to make you proud." "You already have, sweetheart," Emily replied, giving her daughter a warm hug. "And no matter where you go, we'll always be here for you." The day Grace left for college was a bittersweet one. As Daniel helped Grace load the car with boxes and bags, Emily stood on the porch, holding Ethan's hand. "Mom, I'm going to miss Grace so much," Ethan said softly, his voice full of emotion. "I know, sweetie," Emily replied, kneeling down to his level. "But this is a big adventure for her, and she'll come back to visit." "I guess," Ethan said, a little uncertain. "I know it's hard," Emily said, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "But remember, she'll always be your big sister, and no matter where she goes, she'll be thinking of you. And now it's your turn to be the big brother." You've got to look out for everyone. Ethan nodded, wiping his eyes. Grace came over to give Ethan one last hug before getting in the car. I'm going to miss you so much, little brother. But I'll be back before you know it. I'll keep the treehouse safe for you, Ethan promised. Grace smiled at her little brother before turning to Emily and Daniel. Thanks for everything, Mom. Dad. I wouldn't be here without you. I know you'll do great things, Daniel said, his voice full of pride. Now go make your mark on the world. With a final wave, Grace got into the car and drove off, leaving a mix of emotions behind her. As the house grew quieter without Grace, Emily and Daniel settled into a new rhythm. They had always been a team, but now there was a new dynamic, just the two of them at home with Ethan, who was growing into a teenager himself. He often spent hours in the workshop with Daniel, learning the trade, and he showed a keen interest in technology, particularly robotics. One weekend, as they were cleaning out the attic, Ethan discovered an old toolbox that once belonged to Daniel's father. It had been packed away for years, and inside, Ethan found a small collection of old, dusty tools along with a few of his grandfather's blueprints. Dad, look what I found, Ethan said, his voice excited. He spread the tools and plans out on the table. Daniel's eyes softened as he examined the objects. That's my father's toolbox, he said quietly. I used to work with him on small projects when I was your age. These blueprints, he paused. These are the designs for the barn he wanted to build. We never got around to it. Ethan's eyes lit up. Can I try to build it? I could use it for my robotics projects. Daniel smiled. I think that's a great idea, Ethan. Let's do it together. The project brought them even closer, with Daniel teaching Ethan not only about construction but also about perseverance, patience, and the importance of legacy. As the barn took shape in their backyard, it became a symbol of their family's strength and shared history, a place for their passions to grow. A year passed, and Emily received an unexpected invitation, an offer to speak at an architecture conference in Chicago about the impact of community-driven designs. It was a huge opportunity, one she hadn't anticipated. As she discussed the offer with Daniel, she could see his support written on his face. You've worked hard for this, Emily, Daniel said. You've got the experience, and this could open doors for you to help even more people. I think you should go. But what about Ethan? Emily asked, feeling torn. I'll take care of him while you're away, Daniel said. Besides, he's starting to take on more projects of his own. We're both getting better at this. Emily agreed to the trip, and soon, she was on her way to Chicago, her heart full of excitement and a touch of nervousness. As she stood on stage at the conference, presenting her ideas about the role of community in shaping architecture, she looked out at the audience and felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't realized she was missing. The applause at the end of her speech echoed in her mind, and she realized that this wasn't just about the recognition. It was about knowing that she had made a difference. When Emily returned home, Daniel and Ethan greeted her with open arms. How was the conference? Daniel asked. It was incredible, Emily said, her eyes sparkling. I met so many amazing people and I learned so much. But what's more important is that I finally feel like I found my true purpose. Ethan, who had been busy in his workshop, looked up from his project and smiled. I'm glad you're back, Mom. I need some advice on this robot I'm building. It's for a school competition. You'll get all the advice you need, Emily said, her heart swelling with pride. That evening, as Emily sat at the kitchen table with Daniel and Ethan, she realized how far they had come and how much further they could go. They had built a life together, a life full of love, second chances, and the kind of happiness that was worth fighting for. Here's to the future, Emily said, raising a glass of wine. To the future, Daniel echoed, smiling at her across the table. And as they all clinked their glasses, Emily knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family. As time moved on, Emily, Daniel, and Ethan continued to thrive in their new chapter of life. The community center flourished, gaining even more recognition as a hub for creativity and collaboration. Ethan, now entering high school, grew more involved in the center's activities, using it as a place to showcase his growing interest in robotics and engineering. Emily's work continued to expand as well, as her community-driven design philosophy began to influence larger-scale urban projects. One quiet evening, Emily sat in her office at home, reviewing designs for a new project. She was halfway through a blueprint for a sustainable housing development when she heard the front door open. Ethan's voice carried through the house.
Dad. Mom.
I did it. Emily smiled and got up from her desk, heading to the living room where Daniel and Ethan were. She found her son holding a small robot, the product of months of hard work and countless late-night sessions in the workshop. "What did you do, Ethan?" Emily asked, her voice full of curiosity. Ethan grinned, his eyes bright with pride. "I built my first robot for the science fair. It's a little clunky, but it works. It can pick up objects and move them around." He demonstrated by making the robot pick up a small ball from the table and move it to a different spot on the floor. Daniel watched, his heart swelling with pride. "That's incredible, buddy. You've got the same talent your grandfather had." Ethan beamed. "Thanks, Dad. I'm so proud of you," Emily said, kneeling down to give him a hug. "You're going to do amazing things, I just know it." As the months passed, Ethan's passion for robotics blossomed. He won first place at the science fair, and his project was even featured in the local newspaper. The experience sparked a new idea in Emily. She had always wanted to incorporate technology into her designs in a way that benefited communities, and Ethan's success made her think about ways she could do just that. "Maybe we could build a space in the community center where kids can come and learn about robotics," she suggested to Daniel one evening. "It could be a place for them to build things, work together, and maybe even collaborate on larger projects." Daniel was immediately on board. "We've always wanted to give back to the community in a way that sparks creativity. This could be perfect." They started planning a new section of the community center, an innovation lab where kids could experiment with technology, robotics, and design. Emily reached out to local tech companies for sponsorship and volunteers, while Daniel worked on designing the space itself. The launch of the Innovation Lab was a massive success, with local students coming in to explore, learn, and collaborate. Ethan became a mentor to younger kids, teaching them about engineering and robotics. Emily watched with pride as her son helped guide the next generation of creators, just as she had once done in her own field. In the midst of these new ventures, Emily received an unexpected phone call from her former professor at the architecture school. "Emily," he said, his voice full of excitement, "I've got a proposal for you. There's a major project coming up in the city, a new community complex. I think you'd be the perfect person to lead the design." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The project was huge, but it would also be the challenge of a lifetime. "I'd be honored," she said, her voice steady but excited. The project, which involved designing a multi-purpose community space that integrated both sustainable living and cutting-edge technology, was exactly the kind of work Emily had always dreamed of. She worked tirelessly, using all her experience and knowledge to create a design that would serve as a model for the future of urban living. Daniel, who had always been supportive of her career, was equally excited by the prospect. "This is it, Emily. This is your moment." The project came to fruition after nearly a year of hard work, and when it was finally completed, it exceeded even Emily's own expectations. The community complex became a beacon of sustainability, technology, and inclusivity, a place where families could live, work, and play together. Emily's design was celebrated for its forward-thinking approach, and she was invited to present her work at conferences across the country. Through it all, Daniel and Ethan remained by her side. Daniel, ever the supportive partner, continued to grow his woodworking business, expanding it into custom home furniture and even collaborating with Emily on designs for some of her new projects. Ethan, now on his way to studying engineering in college, followed his own path but remained deeply connected to the work his mother was doing. One evening, after a long day at the community center, Emily sat on the porch with Daniel, watching the sun set over the horizon. Ethan had gone out with friends, and the house was quiet for the first time in weeks. Daniel turned to Emily, his expression thoughtful. "You know, when we first met, I never could have imagined all of this. The community center, the family we've built, the projects you've created. I don't think I've ever been prouder of anything in my life." Emily smiled, her heart full. "I feel the same way. But we couldn't have done it alone. You've always been by my side, helping me grow and encouraging me. I couldn't have asked for a better partner. Daniel took her hand, his voice soft. I think we've created something beautiful together, Emily. Something that will last for generations. Emily looked out over the peaceful landscape, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The life they had built, together with their children, was everything she had ever wanted, and more. It was a testament to resilience, love, and second chances. We've come a long way, she said quietly, but we've still got so much ahead of us. Daniel smiled, squeezing her hand. And I wouldn't want to face it with anyone else but you. As the last light of the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat together in content silence, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it as a family, united, strong, and full of hope. As the years passed, Emily, Daniel, and Ethan continued to build upon the foundation they had created together. The community center had become a central part of the neighborhood, hosting annual events, educational programs, and workshops that empowered local residents to connect, learn, and grow. Emily's design philosophy, which valued community, sustainability, and creativity, had become a model for other cities to follow. One afternoon, Emily received a letter from the mayor's office. She opened it cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The letter contained an invitation to receive a prestigious award for her work in urban development and community-driven architecture. The mayor and several influential city leaders had recognized her impact on the city and its surrounding neighborhoods. Emily couldn't help but smile, knowing how much this meant, not just for her, but for the people she had worked so hard to help over the years. When she shared the news with Daniel, his eyes sparkled with pride. "You've earned this, Emily. You've always believed in the power of a community, and now the city is recognizing it." The ceremony took place in a grand hall downtown, where city leaders gathered to honor those who had made significant contributions to the growth and well-being of the city. Emily stood on stage, receiving the award, her heart full of gratitude. She made sure to mention Daniel, Ethan, and the countless volunteers who had made her projects possible. As the applause echoed through the hall, Emily thought back to the early days, the moments of doubt, the struggles with her marriage, the years spent finding her path. But in that moment, she realized how much had changed. She had found her true calling, and with Daniel and Ethan by her side, she had created a life that was full of love, purpose, and meaning. In the following years, Ethan graduated from college with honors, having followed his passion for engineering and robotics. He had already started working for a tech startup, but he never lost sight of the values his parents had instilled in him. He continued to mentor young students at the community center, encouraging them to pursue their dreams and passions, just as his parents had always done for him. As Ethan's career blossomed, Emily and Daniel turned their attention to a new project, an expansion of the community center to include a tech hub for young entrepreneurs. Emily's vision was to provide a space where young minds could come together, share ideas, and develop innovative solutions to local challenges. This new chapter was the culmination of everything she had worked for, blending her love for architecture, technology, and community building. One evening, while walking through the new tech hub with Daniel, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of contentment. The space was filled with young people working on everything from mobile apps to sustainable farming projects, and it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. "Look at this," Daniel said, his voice filled with awe. "You've done it again. Look at how many lives you've touched." Emily smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Daniel. This is our legacy." They stood together, hand in hand, watching the future unfold before them. The room buzzed with energy, ideas, and the promise of a better tomorrow. They had come a long way from the uncertain beginnings of their lives together, through heartache, struggle, and triumph, but now they stood at the threshold of something even bigger than they had ever imagined. As the years continued to pass, the Carter-Miller family continued to thrive, creating more opportunities for future generations. Ethan and Grace, now both successful in their respective fields, often returned to the community center to mentor the younger kids, just as their parents had done for them. Daniel and Emily, with the wisdom they had gained from their own experiences, remained pillars of their community, always working to build a better world for those who would come after them. And so, the story of Emily, Daniel, and their family was one of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds that shaped not only their lives, but the lives of many others. They had built a legacy that would live on for years to come, one that spoke of second chances, community, and the endless possibilities that awaited those willing to take risks, follow their dreams, and believe in the power of connection. The end. Thank you so much for following Emily and Daniel's journey. We hope their story about resilience, love, and building a better future inspired you. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more exciting tales, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. That way, you'll never miss out on more amazing stories coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.